What's up, everybody? This is Charlie Potter, senior team writer with BamaOnLine.com, back with another BOL basketball show, and this one's to preview the NCAA Tournament. We're here. It's March. It's been March for a minute, but it really feels like March now that we're going to hear the sweet music from CBS and I guess TNT and TBS and True TV. Everybody needs to figure out if they have that. That's the beautiful thing about YouTube TV nowadays. You can do the quad box with all those. It's a beautiful time of year for that. It's a beautiful time of year for basketball. It might not be so beautiful up in Cleveland for Blake this weekend. I think it's supposed to snow. We'll get to that in a little bit. But I want to just kind of start the show off by asking you guys just where this NCAA tournament ranks for you just among all sporting events. Because for me, like, it's kind of tough to compare it to things with football because it's kind of one and done. You don't just have game after game after game. Bowl season, I guess you kind of do, but it's more spread out. But I kind of liken it to maybe the Olympics or like the World Series or the NBA Finals. It just feels like you have something to watch every day. But in this case, especially this week with the first and second rounds, it's just nonstop basketball. So for you, Tim, I know you're a huge hoops fan. Where does it rank for you?
I mean, it's kind of like the Olympics for cool people, when you're not trying to make up
Jesus.
curling. All my friends become curling experts, and the people that twirl the stuff, they all become these experts. I've known them my whole life. They're giving me the breakdown. To me, it's the best time of year. I've always loved it, but when you took away that kind of that January 1st vibe of the bowl game, which was always just unbelievable, especially
Mm-hmm.
for my generation. You had all those great games in a row, and you've spread it out. We have bowl games for like 45 days, I think. I mean,
Feels
it's a
like it.
lot. But this comes in hot and heavy. We've now extended. We got two games tonight. We got two games Tuesday night, two games Wednesday night, and then this thing kicks off early in the morning. I'm excited. I was always excited. It's my top event. Um, Overall as an event. Of course, I still love the single game championships and the bowl game and all that stuff. But as for one event, basketball, NCAA tournaments right there for me.
What about you, Blake? I kind of have a feeling that you're going to lean the same way.
Yeah, I mean, it's been number one for me for about as long as I can remember. I mean, I love like the Super Bowl, the NBA Finals, like those are all really fun. College football, really like a lot of regular season college football games are up there, like the Iron Bowl or the big matchups during the season. But as far as a sporting event and what you can get out of it, like I don't think there's much more than like March Madness, the NCAA tournament. I remember growing up, watching games in class during school and when the games would start on Thursday and Friday. And then now with work, March and these couple weeks become incredibly busy and fun with travel and getting to go to a lot of new places, see a lot of new arenas. So whether it was childhood or now, there's still so much fun that comes with it. You get so much basketball, so many storylines. It's great if you love the sport of basketball, and even people that don't. Like, there's no better time to be a sports fan. I think like this Thursday and Friday are the two best days on the sports calendar, with 16 games each day, going from pretty much when you wake up to when you go to bed. Like it's just so much fun. I'm really excited for it.
I have to point out the obvious. Childhood to now is the same.
Okay,
That time frame,
whatever.
what it's the same time frame.
2 weeks
This
ago.
is
Two
yeah.
weeks ago.
He said school. He was talking about this afternoon. He
Right.
was in science class. He was all excited.
It is funny though because like as soon as we posted when the game was going to tip off on Friday, which is 11:40 a.m. Central Time on Friday in Cleveland, it was just a chain of responses on the BOL roundtable about, well, guess I'm going to be calling into work today, or I guess I'm not going to be productive at work. It is fun because it's earlier in the day. You kind of make a full day out of it because like Saturday in the fall, it's kind of that's what it feels like to me. It feels like the Saturdays in the fall where every game means something, almost like a rivalry. Saturday, that last weekend of the regular season in college football, that's what it feels like. But it's over the course of 2 days, and you really got the full weekend with the round of 32 as well. And then obviously every game gets more important as you go on. So yeah, it's tough to beat March Madness. It has an amazing name, amazing music, like I said. Even when you get one shiny moment at the end, that's a lot of fun. So it's tough to beat this. But Alabama, obviously, we didn't have any concern or anything going into it. We knew Alabama was going to be firmly in the mix. We knew that they were going to be a number 2 seed. That's what ended up happening. We talked about it on the last show about maybe climbing up to 1 seed, but I think what happened in Nashville in the SEC tournament went about like we expected. Maybe not so much the outcome of the Florida game, or maybe even the outcome of the Kentucky game, because that was kind of a beatdown. But you look at it, Alabama in the quarterfinal round beat Kentucky 99-70. Now we got to mention Kentucky was shorthanded. They were without Lamont Butler. That's a big blow to them. I'm going to be interested to see what his availability looks like for this NCAA tournament. But then they turn around and place a Florida team that's just a buzzsaw right now and lost 104-82. And we'll get into that a little bit more specifically, but just overall, Alabama and Nashville. Tim, what was your big takeaway?
Yeah, I mean it's kind of what you expected. I mean, the Auburn win took away so much pressure going into that. You kind of could just enjoy it. I look at Alabama people that act like this season's been frustrating. And again, going back to my childhood, this is the best history. This is the best season in the history of basketball, basically. From my childhood, knowing you were in, hoping you got a 1, actually settling for a 2, beating the number 1 team in the country on the road, beating Kentucky 3 times in a row. I mean, the list goes on of how great this season's been, how much fun this season's been. So Kentucky didn't surprise me. I mean, Alabama. We talked about the first time they met. It's a bad matchup for Kentucky. Alabama's a bad matchup for Kentucky. And on the flip side, you kind of feel like Florida's a bad matchup for Alabama, especially now. And hey, Florida's a bad matchup for everybody to some degree, but especially now because they're playing so well. They are the hottest team in the country. They still got they still got to stay hot for 6 more games. We know that can be a stretch, but definitely a formidable opponent. And these last 11 games, where I've counted 2 road games, Arkansas and Texas, 2 road games that everybody just dismissed as easy, and they were both NCAA tournament teams. So that's how rough that final stretch was, which is just it's a relief to get to the NCAA tournament. I think if you're an Alabama coach or player,
it does kind of feel like that. You get some time to breathe, and we'll get into getting healthy here in a minute. But you and I were up in Nashville, Blake. We watched those games, and when you look at the Florida game, I'm gonna go back to you on this, Tim, and I'm just gonna shift to the next topic. Just, do you kind of overreact to that? Is there a need to overreact to the Florida game? Because I think when you look at it, it was a perfect storm, right? You had Grant Nelson goes out with the injury at the under 4 timeout. Cliff Amore is in foul trouble. The guards didn't play great. It was kind of, yes, Florida's good. I think a lot of us probably have them making it to the Final Four and maybe cutting down the nets in San Antonio. But everything also kind of went wrong for Alabama in that game.
Yeah, Florida is really good, for one. And we knew that, too. Like, we just watched Florida come to Tuscaloosa and beat Alabama on their home floor about a week and a half ago. So, we have seen how good Florida is and how good Florida can be. But Alabama played really well for a half of that game, pretty much. I mean, that game went into halftime, and I think it was like a 1 or 2 point game. And it was a really high level basketball game for the first half of what we were seeing between both teams, guys making plays on both teams. But then in the second half, it really all kind of started to fall apart, like you said, when Nelson got hurt, because he was already playing the best of any of Alabama's bigs. Florida's bigs are already better than Alabama's, and so you're going to have good games from guys on the interior. And then Cliff was in foul trouble, so then you had Jaron Stevenson slid down to the 5 when Florida started to really make their run, and the difference there is that he was playing the 3 in the first half because Alabama needed more length on the floor to deal with how big of a team Florida is. So that kind of puts you in a personnel disadvantage. And then on top of that, when your best playing big goes out and your guards still haven't shown up all game and did not the rest of the game, that leads to, the result that you got. And Florida hit a ton of tough shots. Like, it wasn't all bad defense by Alabama. There were some really tough shots in there made by Walter Clayton, Elijah Martin, all those guys. Like, they're really good. But I'm not overreacting to it. I don't think it's like a super big deal. I mean, we've talked about on this show plenty of times, like, look at what they did last year. They lost at the hands of Florida in the SEC tournament in kind of a blowout fashion and then went on to make the Final Four. But even then, even with that game factored in this year, they're still playing a lot better over the last little bit of the season than they were a year ago. Like, they're still playing pretty good basketball. You saw that with the Kentucky game. I think that was honestly maybe a little more important than the Florida game, to come to Nashville and make sure you get a win and do so in dominating fashion, coming off that Auburn win in overtime the weekend before. I think seeing the way that they played in that Kentucky game and seeing them compete in the first half of the Florida game, to see it unravel the way that it did, was just kind of one of those days. I don't think it's indicative of anything long term. And I think the way that they have been playing outside of really that second half stretch of Florida should be really encouraging.
Tim, I kind of want to ask you the same thing, but with a little additional stuff here. When you look at the guards in general, marking it up with 9 points, I don't think he made a field goal in the second half. LeBaron Feinlein looked great against Kentucky, but he only had one bucket in the game against Florida. One, I think you're in agreement with us is you're not overreacting to the loss to Florida, but two, how big and how much do you need to get out of these guards entering this NCAA tournament?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're everything. Everybody's worried about Grant, and I think you definitely want Grant healthy, but this is a guard lineup that can carry you. This wouldn't be the first team to go to a Final Four with a guard heavy dependency. I mean, we were talking a few shows ago about the number of points they scored that week in back to back games, 40 something and 50 something. Aiden, Chris, Philon, and Mark are some guys that can throw up 20 points on you pretty quick. Now they haven't, and obviously, it's been interesting to see some of the criticism to Mark this week, who was one of 10 people as a national finalist. He's a first team all AP All American, again, setting all kind of crazy stuff. Hadn't always been at that level. Are y'all getting an echo?
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're good now.
Mark obviously is not going to play every night at a 30-point level, but he's going to play pretty consistently. And even games he doesn't score, he's distributed and all of that. But what you can't have is a low scoring Mark, and then a low scoring Chris and Aiden and Philon. Two of those four guys have got to step up and get buckets for Alabama. Obviously, Grant would be a huge help, but I've got no panic with this team. Once they beat Auburn, I thought it was house money. I still think it was a long shot you would have to beat Kentucky, Florida, and Tennessee to have a shot at a 1 seed, just to have a shot. And
Mhm.
there's no guarantee they were moving Florida off that one line with a loss either. So I'm not that upset. I mean, want to see them be more competitive, but I agree with Blake and you. The first half showed me, and the first game showed me they can compete with Florida. They got to figure out how to beat them, and that's a long way down the road before they get there again.
Yeah, you look at just the backcourts in this game, which I mean, again, Florida is their hair's on fire right now the way they're playing, but they outscored Alabama. Just the starting trios for each team from a backcourt standpoint, it was 54-26. That can't happen if you want to kind of hang with the Gators because they have the bigs. They kind of have it all right now. And for Alabama, yeah, they had a nice showing against Kentucky. I think that's important. But now you get a little bit of time to rest. You get a couple of games that you should win. I think it would be a disappointment if Alabama were to go out in the first weekend of the season. I think we're all in agreement there. But you start to ramp up some momentum, and we've seen what this team can do with that this season. But we've talked about them, kind of beat around the bush a little bit. I think everybody's waiting to see what happens with Grant Nelson. It sounds like he's not going to be able to go on Friday. I think they're still going to kind of wait and see. But Nate Oates on Monday night on his radio show said he's questionable for this game. And I'm going to kind of read the quote here so I don't butcher it. He said, "We're hoping at a minimum he'll be ready by Sunday with the possibility of maybe Friday." So that to me, in Nate Oates' terminology, the way he is kind of blunt and everything, it sounds like he's going to probably play or wait to play in the round of 32. Robert Morris is a good team, but Alabama can beat Robert Morris, I think, without Grant Nelson. But what do you just make up of this injury, Tim? It's a left knee injury for Grant. Again, he went out in the first half of that under 4 media timeout. He came back out. He was walking gingerly, but still walking around. I know he saw a specialist on Monday to kind of get an opinion on it. We'll see what happens throughout the week. But with him and this injury, just what do you make of it? And if he can't go on Friday, what does that mean for Alabama?
Injuries just suck in basketball. Anything lower body is just a pain in the butt. A twist, a slightly twisted ankle lingers. I mean, you're playing a very vertical game and a very fast, quick twitch game. Obviously, that affects. And Grant was feeling himself again in that game. Had another, had another of a top 10 Alabama dunks in history, possibly. That'd be two in the last couple of games for Grant.
Mm-hmm.
So I could see his frustration. He looked upset. We were told he was upset. He wanted to play. But yeah, I mean, clear it out, some rest. I don't know if there's fluid, but there are ways to make it a little bit easier. But obviously, you want to beat you need to be able to beat Robert Morris without Grant Nelson. Grant Nelson has not been a 30-10 guy every
Mhm.
game this year to begin with. They won other games where Grant wasn't at his best. But I would like to see a little bit more Sherelle maybe. Hopefully Reed can contribute a little bit. Jaron Stevenson, we haven't really talked about him. His last couple of games have shown a little bit. I mean, he's progressively seems to have got better. Of course, when you start like 0 for 38, it doesn't really get worse from three. So he's actually got better, but his shot's better. And he looks more comfortable. Defends really well, gives a lot of effort. So yeah, I mean 22, 23-point favorites. I mean you expect Alabama to be able to go in here, and that's probably factoring in Grant not being in the game. So I think they would probably lean on the side of that. So if you can get him and even a minimum of the round of 32, keep him a minimum.
Mhm.
That's even better because you're looking at a brief play and almost 2 weeks of rest.
Yeah, and talking about Jaron, I just caught up with him a little bit in the locker room after the Kentucky game, and he's talking about just being more confident. He's worked with his dad on his shot, and you can tell he's improved from just a 3-point shooting standpoint. He looks more confident. He looks more comfortable. And if they can get him to play, I don't want to say like he did in the Clemson game last year. That's kind of asking a lot, but a smidge of that I think would help. And that's what I was going to ask you, Blake. Is just assuming Grant Nelson doesn't play in this first round game against Robert Morris, just who needs to step up in his place? I know Tim mentioned some guys, but in your opinion, where do you think they kind of turn to?
Well, firstly, I agree that you shouldn't need Grant Nelson to beat Robert Morris. Like, if you need Grant Nelson to beat Robert Morris, you have a lot bigger problems than Grant
Yeah.
Nelson being out. But I think Jaron Stevenson's a good one. I think he is probably my guess for who will start in Grant Nelson's place. We know that Oates has trusted Stevenson to start a lot this year, where a lot of this year he was doing it at the 3, so now I could play the 4, start next to Cliff with 3 other guards in the lineup. I think that'd be pretty interesting. But getting a lot of Mo Diabate, I think, is going to be really important with Grant out, because Grant is the leading rebounder on the team, and without that, you're going to need guys to step up in that area. Cliff's going to have more than one rebound, like he did against Florida. Nate Oates said that on the radio show the other night, and he said that Cliff knows that and has owned up to that and wants to play better. So more out of Cliff, more out of Mo. Mo's going to be really important coming off the bench and being a guy who can be a spark on the glass, especially missing a rebounder like Nelson. So those two are guys I'm really looking to contribute, and just everyone in general kind of being tough, like bringing toughness, playing blue collar like Nodotes wants, like attacking the rim, just filling in for all of the things that Grant Nelson kind of does. And so I think they're more than capable of doing that. I think they have a matchup where you can afford to lose Grant Nelson and still kind of work some guys in and hopefully get him back for that Sunday game, because that'll be a little bit tougher.
I wanted to ask you guys about this just in general. When the bracket came out on Sunday, we learned that Alabama was the 2 seed in the East. The 1 seed there is Duke. Just about the draw that Alabama got, because that's always important. We talk about it in March. What kind of draw did your team get? That could depend a lot on what kind of run they make. And you look at it, obviously we've talked about Robert Morris. That's Alabama's first round matchup. That's the 2-15 matchup. They'll play the winner of St. Mary's and Vanderbilt if they beat Robert Morris on Sunday. And then assuming Alabama goes on a little bit of a winning streak here, you look at the rest of the bracket. You have Wisconsin's the 3 seed. This is if chalk kind of plays out. Wisconsin's the 3 seed. You also got a 6 seed BYU in there. That's a potential a matchup in the Sweet 16. And then you've got, of course, Duke is the 1 seed at the top of the bracket. You also have teams like Arizona and Oregon out there. What do you think of the draw that Alabama got from an East region standpoint, Tim? You think it was good, bad, you indifferent? How are you feeling?
No, I like it. I mean, you look at what Florida and Auburn got. I mean, you felt like they were almost punished for being, they were 1 and 2 seed, right? 1 overall, 2 overall. I mean, you kind of feel like they got a little bit punished. I find it funny that this schedule was so tough that at least 3 of these teams were on Nate Oates' schedule to begin with, that they ended up playing them. That's what I like from the scheduling standpoint, is that they're going to have seen a little bit of everything these teams can offer. Teams that play
Mhm.
fast, teams that play slow, methodical teams like Wisconsin. They've seen heavy, big men, talented teams like Duke and Auburn and Florida. So they've seen a little bit of everything, and that's not always the case. You talk about matchups, but I think Alabama got a good deal. I'll tell you what, I'd be pissed if my second round game was Kansas or UConn. And I've had everybody tell me how bad these teams were. They were top 5 preseason teams. They've got that top 5 talent. They got pretty good coaches. We've seen these motivated teams who underachieved during the season, overachieved in the tournament. So I think that is about as set up as well as you could get. You feel like you like your chances against St. Mary's or Vanderbilt if you get by Robert Morris, and then after that, it's you're in the Sweet 16. You just have to see who's
Well, I've
left.
heard that's a disappointment, though.
That's I don't understand. I mean, these people should have grown up with me. They would daggone be naked in the streets to get to the Sweet 16. I don't know what I don't know some of these guys. I mean, it's like there's never been an era of basketball where a Sweet 16 with a first team All American wasn't a good year. There's never been an era of that. So, but just you want to get through that bracket and then see what's left around you because a lot of times it's a mess. It looks like somebody threw a grenade in your bracket and just blew it up. All kind of stuff happening there. So I do like Alabama's matchup.
You mentioned the potential second round matchups. How pissed you got to be if you're Auburn? Shit, you look there and you could face a Louisville team in the second round. Louisville's number 10 in the AP poll, which I know the AP poll doesn't really matter this time of year anymore, but that's crazy. It goes to show, like you said, that the draw is important. And I think, Blake, you're kind of in agreement with Tim, just the draw that Alabama got. How you feel about it?
Yeah, I think it's a good draw. I mean, as a 2 seed, you should get a good draw in your first weekend. You're going to get a 15 seed in the first round, and kind of like we said, I'd be shocked if Robert Morris was able to keep it close. Like I think that's just a team that Alabama's far and away better than. And I was even looking at Robert Morris earlier. They played 2 teams in the top 150 in KenPom all year. They beat Cornell by 10. And then they played number 53 West Virginia, who I think was the first team out of the tournament, and they lost by 30. So that's kind of the quality of competition that Robert Morris has played this season. It's nothing like what they'll be seeing on Friday with Alabama. And then as far as the second round goes, I don't think either St. Mary's or Vanderbilt are particularly scary, especially compared to some other teams on that 7 or 10 line. I think seeing a talented team like Kansas there, who's I think at the 7 seed in Florida's region, or a 10 seed like Arkansas, who's really talented, I think that would be a little scarier than a St. Mary's Vanderbilt potential matchup. And we've seen Alabama play Vanderbilt already. That was a 16-point win in Coleman, where Alabama didn't even really play well. I think they gave up like 50 in the second half. So really could have won that game by 25 or more if they had played a little better. And then St. Mary's, it's interesting because that's one of the slowest teams in college basketball playing potentially the fastest team in college basketball in Alabama. So it would be a pretty unique contrast of styles there. But again, like as far as who these teams have played, like Vanderbilt's played a much tougher schedule than St. Mary's. I don't think St. Mary's has played many teams at all that are at Alabama's level. They have a couple wins over Gonzaga, which are pretty nice. But other than that, they haven't been overly impressive. I think it's a pretty good draw if you're Alabama, and you could get the Alabama St. Mary's game that we could have gotten a year ago when we were looking like we were going to get a 4-5 matchup between Alabama and St. Mary's, but they lost to Grand Canyon in the first round. So it'll be interesting to see who Alabama ends up playing once they get past Robert Morris and who they play on Sunday. But I'm not super worried about either one. And then kind of like you said, Tim, like whoever you play in the Sweet 16, it doesn't really matter. Like getting to the Sweet 16 is a really hard thing to do. Like there's a reason that so many teams kind of celebrate it, and it doesn't feel that way to the casual fan, I feel like, because you're still 4 rounds short of winning a championship. But once you get to the Sweet 16, like it's all really good teams that are there. And it's really about who you match up with and what kind of matchups you get and how you're able to play from there. But you want to get there and then kind of see what happens. It's hard to set expectations further than that.
Charlie, real quick, I think the expectations, the preseason is what has now got everybody some people disappointed about a possible just Sweet 16 run, but this isn't the same team that you saw in preseason.
Mm-hmm.
They've lost players. Grant's been injured. We've seen Chris Youngblood injured. We've seen Reed injured. They've lost 2 players for the year. This isn't the same preseason. So the expectations are different now. So Sweet 16 is absolutely acceptable. The key for me is the Sweet 16, then you still got a chance to go further. But again, get to that Sweet 16, win these 2 games, and then figure everything else out.
And that's where we're going to kind of end this is just how far do you think this Alabama team will go? I know that's kind of putting you guys on the spot here, but I know Blake's probably filled out 50 brackets by now. Tim definitely printed one out and etched it with a chisel and a stone. But it's a situation where Nate Oates has kind of set those expectations that Tim was just talking about. He was talking on the Zoom call when the bracket was announced and said anything outside of a Final Four is a disappointment. And that's kind of going back to those preseason expectations that he himself kind of put on this team. So when you look at it, Alabama has the 5th best odds to win the national championship behind all the number 1 seeds. I think this team can get to the Elite 8. Beyond that, it feels like gravy at this point. Again, the Sweet 16 is a successful season. I don't think most rational people will argue that. But I think this team, with the draw that they got, is capable of getting to the Elite 8. If it's chalk, they'll meet Duke. If Cooper Flagg's healthy, that's a tough game. It's possible to get back to San Antonio, but I think right now, Elite 8 is kind of where I'm leaning. What about you, Tim?
Yeah, first, Nate has no chill. My coach has no chill. Dude has no chill whatsoever. I think he thinks he's Larry Bird. You know, he hears those stories telling people which shot he's about to do and he's going to hit it. Love the confidence, set it up the season. I think the guys will feed off of that. But I agree with Elite 8. I think that's the run. I mean, I do think this team can't overlook anybody, not Robert Morris, not Vandy, St. Mary's, but that's just the kind of year it is, and that's the kind of term it is. You don't really get a chance to have an off day. You really need to come out. You need to play basketball. When you can step on somebody's throat, you step on it, you end it. You don't, make this last any longer than it could. For Duke, I'm very interested in because I was looking at their schedule. I don't know if anybody else did. It's not the toughest schedule in the world.
No.
I mean, the ACC had 2 other teams that went to the NCAA tournament. They had a really good game with Auburn. Of course, Auburn is a good team, but I think that, overall, the boogeyman for me in this tournament is Florida and possibly Houston overall, if we're talking about the 1 seeds.
Yeah,
But
I mean,
Elite Eight for me with Alabama.
I think when you look at it, I think that Alabama has the pathway, and I think that this could be the case for a lot of guys, but there's some older players on this team, and they talked about it last year with their veteran, like a guy like Aaron Estrada. They wanted to win for Aaron Estrada. Well, now you've got Mark Sears and Grant Nelson and Chris Youngblood and Cliff. There's more reason to get fired up and to play for those guys. If you're someone like a Mo Diabate or Jaron Stevenson or Aiden Holloway, those young guys, like there's reason for it. So it'll be interesting to see if they kind of put some stuff together because they can go on a run by all means. But I know, Blake, that's something that you heard about in the locker room talking to some of the players. It's just that motivation. I'm not asking you to expound on that. I'm more asking for your opinion. Do you agree with Elite 8? You think it goes further? You don't think they don't get that far? Where are you leaning right now?
Yeah, I think as a 2 seed, you should say the Elite 8 because if things go chalk, that's how far you get, and then you run into the 1 seed and you lose. I think this team is capable of winning 6 games and winning the whole thing. I think we've seen this team at its best is as good as anybody in this field, and they can win a game against anybody. I think it's going to be difficult for anybody. This is the hardest. I'd consider this the hardest championship to win in like college or pro, like major sports, with the way that a single elimination 64 team tournament works. It's just really hard. My prediction, I think get to the Elite 8 and see what happens. Like I kind of like you said, Charlie, like you can win these first 2 games, and we've kind of already talked about that. And then I like the potential matchup in the Sweet 16, whoever it really is. I think Wisconsin plays very similarly to Alabama, and Alabama does it better. I think BYU is a pretty scary team. They're a pretty trendy pick right now that I've seen. I've seen a lot of people taking BYU past Alabama to the Elite 8. The 6th seed in that region, but I also think obviously that's a team Alabama can beat. I've seen some people taking 11 seed VCU a couple games into the Sweet 16 and facing Alabama. So there's some intriguing matchups here, but I think that Alabama will make it to the Elite 8, and then I think they'll match up with Duke, and from there I really don't know. Like that's if we did get to see that in Newark, get to see a matchup between Alabama and Duke. That'd be really fun. Get to see Cooper Flagg, get to see a bunch of really good Duke freshmen and sophomores, young players against an Alabama team full of fifth years. It'd be an interesting matchup, and one that honestly I hope we get to see, because that would be a really fun way to see this tournament go here in a couple weeks.
Because that's the game we wanted to see in the ACC SEC matchup. You remember
Right.
we discussed that. So, I mean, even better than that, ACC SEC is the Elite Eight.
That's tough to beat.
Yeah.
I think Alabama is one of the 8 best teams in the country, and we'll see if they can put together, if they can stay healthy for this. But any last thoughts on the bracket? You guys have any hot takes when you're filling it out? Anything that would set this thing on fire? Or are you guys keeping it pretty calm?
I think you got to watch UConn when they play Florida. I know, again, that's a talented roster. Danny Hurley's a little bit of a nut job. He can get you motivated. We know he can coach. And you know what? I think a guy like Hurley's so motivated that he thinks nobody's going to remember this regular season if we beat Florida. Nobody will ever remember. There will be no more they're disappointed. I know what an obstacle that is, but maybe it's just that's a hot take. That is not something I would bet heavily on. But I think UConn, I think there's some scary, and we said that when Alabama's possibly getting a 1 seed, there's some scary 8-9 matchups out there. I just wouldn't want to play them in the second round, but luckily Florida has been playing tremendous basketball.
What about you, Blake? You got any scorching hot takes over there when you fill out your bracket?
I don't know if I have any hot takes. I don't fill out 50 brackets. I fill out one, and I'm
proud of you.
Yeah, I can't do multiple. Fill out one bracket and stand on it and see what happens. But I don't know. It's a tough year because I think the top of the sport's so good. Like, I have a hard time envisioning a lot of chaos where you don't have a ton of 1 and 2 seeds in the Elite Eight, which means that's what's going to happen. And this tournament's probably going to be crazy, and a bunch of teams are going to lose early because right when it seems like you know what's going to happen, the exact opposite happens. Right. So, that means I'll probably be incredibly wrong, and we'll have like a 4 and an 8 and something else in the Final Four. But that's the fun of the tournament. That's why I'm really excited to start it.
Now, I think, if anything, I want to see Arkansas make it to the second weekend and face St. John's, just so you get that John Calipari and Rick Pitino matchup. I think that'd be fun. I also think, kind of going back to what we were talking about a little bit earlier, that Auburn against Louisville, that could be one of the games of the tournament if that's how it shakes out. I think Auburn hasn't been playing well of late, and Louisville has been playing really well. I think that could be a very fun matchup. So if you haven't already, if you're not a subscriber to BOL, which what are you doing if you're not? We do have a $1 for your first week promo. So be sure to take advantage of that. Be sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you're listening via podcast, give us a 5-star rating and review. We greatly appreciate that. And enjoy some basketball this weekend, folks. We'll be back next week to hopefully preview a Sweet 16 trip up to Newark. And until then, we'll see you guys on the next show.